Well, most entrepreneurs focus on business strategy. Research shows that 89% of success comes from our ability to regulate our nervous system under pressure. So what if your biggest edge isn't your strategy, but instead your state? And I have some deep, geeky statistics for you on this one. 89% of decisions made from dysregulation fail. We have studied and proven that you get 3 times better outcomes from a regulated state or nervous system. 75% of burnout comes from quote unquote pushing through, and 2 times more success comes in any goal or any outcome with a proactive regulation practice. And so welcome back to the Mind of George Show. This is the show for entrepreneurs who know that scaling their business is not just about strategies and tactics. And how fitting, today we're talking about state instead. But it's about breaking free from outdated business models, crappy mindsets, or checking the box paths that promise success that never lead there. And it's really about refining your mindset, your relationship with yourself, your customer journey, and building a business that's in alignment, that supports you, that calls in the people that are your dream audience. And today we're diving deep into why you can't build something sustainable from a dysregulated state. And so most entrepreneurs burn out, but not from bad strategy, but from pushing through emotional or nervous system dysregulation. And today we're diving into how to regulate your nervous system so that you can make clear decisions instead of reactive choices. And I cover both the proactive and the reactive side. So we talk about why emotional or nervous system dysregulation kills success, the 2 paths of regulation, how to break free from the reactive patterns, how to create sustainable peak states, and how to find power in peace. And I promise you, there's no pretty way to say this, but you cannot outwork a dysregulated nervous system. So if you are ready to find true sustainable success, this episode will show you exactly how to regulate your state for peak performance. And so without further ado, let's get into the show. Most entrepreneurs don't fail because of a bad strategy. They fail, myself included, because they escalated before they regulated. And the truth is, we can't build something sustainable from a dysregulated state. Can you build something temporarily from a dysregulated state? For sure. Can you build something sustainable that you can keep, that you can grow from a dysregulated state? Never. And when I talk about dysregulation, I'm going to explain what I mean in a minute. But today's episode is probably one of the most important that I'll ever record or ever recorded. Because the reason that most businesses or entrepreneurs break is not because of strategy. The reason that I broke, or the business broke, or that my results broke, or my consistency broke, was not because of strategy. It's because the human driving the business, i.e. myself, was burnt out, overstimulated, and massively reactive. And so I wanted to cover this because this was the most powerful part of that keynote I gave. It's the one that, after speaking to 100+ people about the topics in these 5 episodes that I'm sharing with you, this one, the previous 3, and the last one that's going to follow this, which is on the invisible game. This was the number one thing that everybody had questions about, that landed for everybody, that everybody kept sharing and sharing breakthroughs around, was around regulation, around regulating our nervous system. And so I wanted to start to break this down so that you can have the benefit as an entrepreneur and understand that your competitive edge comes down to your ability to be present and peaceful while regulating your nervous system. And I think all too often, we don't acknowledge or address that hidden cause of chaos, right? That thing that we think is a feast or famine cycle, where business is great or business is bad, or I'm having the best day or the worst day. But it's not really feast or famine. It's our body in massive fight or flight, right? So this shows up in our business and in our life in so many different ways. It's that dopamine crash where we're really excited. We're going to go do this, go do this, go do this. And then all of a sudden, it's the complete opposite end. We're sad, we're depressed, we're burnt out. We're like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to run my business anymore, right? Or we have the launch burnout. We've been going and going and going and going and going. And then all of a sudden, there's a break and we're like, we can't run this at all. We can't be in the business at all. We can't be around it. I don't want to do this anymore. Or the team freak out, where I've seen this and I've done this, where I've been dysregulated, that I thought was feast or famine. My body was in fight or flight. I'm like, I don't know. I don't have the answers. I don't know how to lead us, right? Or I've witnessed those a ton. All those examples, all those moments, that's not a mindset issue. That's not a perspective issue. That is our body, or my body in most of those instances, screaming for stillness, right? It's like my nervous system is screaming for a nap. And not a nap of like I put my head on the pillow, but a nap that I put my nerves on the pillow and I let them rest. Because it's important for us to understand as human beings, but especially in the lens of entrepreneurship, that our brain and our body cannot create a clear strategy when they're in survival mode. The only thing that happens when we are in survival mode is reaction, 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 reaction. And when all we do is react to the things around us, we give away the one thing that we win the game with, which is our perspective and our power of choice. And so when we're constantly reactive because our nervous system is dysregulated, we constantly create more pain and pressure on that dysregulation. And so it's important to understand that a lot of these symptoms that we see, a lot of these moments that we see or experience in our business, they really are just invitations for us to get into our nervous system and to focus on regulating ourselves, our actual nervous system, before we escalate or before we blow up or before we allow that reaction to happen. Because when we think about this in the lens of business, every escalation in business, meaning a unwanted reaction, right? Where we make a massive, rash, poor decision, we send a reactive email, we fly off at the mouth of somebody on social media, we create team friction. Insert example here for you. It starts with our nervous system being dysregulated. And so what do I mean by that? We could feel a heaviness in our chest. We could have a pit in our stomach. We could be sweaty and getting goosebumps. We could be thinking about something completely different than the situation at hand. There's something that's consuming our presence physically that our body is reacting to. We would call that nervous system dysregulation, right? I could be feeling really angry. I could be feeling really frustrated. I could just be frustrated about something not going to plan. But in all those moments, when I'm feeling those states or when I'm in that state, I'm not in the cognizant, clear mind to be able to make a calculated and clear decision. But as entrepreneurs, what are we told to do? What are we taught to do? What is celebrated? It's when we push through, right? We're like, oh, I'll just ignore it, right? Or I'll pretend that I'm present in this meeting, or I'll just say it and I'll deal with it later, right? We push through over and over instead of doing the thing that we are invited to do, which leads to a breakthrough and to clarity, which is pausing and regulating our nervous system. And, you know, when I talk about nervous system dysregulation, when I talk about regulation, they're like these big words that we throw around, but really it's very, very simple. When I'm talking about regulation, all I'm talking about is us being present with our breathing, with our rhythm, with our rest, and with our rituals, right? That's what regulation is. It means that we have two paths to regulating our nervous system. We have the proactive path, which are what are the things that we do every day, consistently and intentionally, to achieve what some would call peak state or an ideal state or the right mindset or the right perspective and the right nervous system state to be able to operate, right? These are things of like having a morning routine, a stillness practice, right? When I talk about rituals, maybe a morning walk, getting a sweat in, the things that I teach on this podcast all the time. Your breathing, right? So when we think about your rituals or your rest or your rhythm, those are things that you're doing proactively every single day to keep your nervous system as regulated and optimized as possible, right? And if you want to think about it in the lens of a car, if you drive a car and the car is floored 24/7, it's eventually going to explode and never perform its best, right? If it's redlining, it's going to seize the engine and it's going to explode. Just like for us, if we don't sleep for like 2 days or 3 days or 4 days, right? Or we're just pushing, eventually we're going to burn out and crash. Or if we think about it in running, if you just go run as far and as fast as you can with no hydration, with no food and no breaks, eventually you're going to crash and burn and die, right? So there's this regulation piece, which is our nervous system. And by pushing through, what we're doing is we're keeping the gas floored, but we're not helping care for or regulate our nervous system. And so when it comes to regulation, there's two paths that I see. There's the proactive path, which are what are the things that I do every single day, no matter what, that keep me in that prime state, that keep my vehicle operating at its absolute best, that keep my vehicle doing the best it can, that keep it performing the best and, getting the most power out of the game. And maybe for us as entrepreneurs, it's like, what are those things that I do that allow me to think the most clearly, that give me the most creative ideas, that bring the most energy and joy into the action items of my day, right? That make me feel calm and peaceful. Those are the things that we're doing proactively. But then we have the other side, which is reactive. And if we think about reactive regulation, what we're doing is we're pre-installing or pre-prepping ourselves for when things are going to happen, because they're guaranteed to happen, when a team member is going to get upset at you, or a client's going to be mean to you, or a deal's going to fall through, or a launch doesn't work according to plan. There's this reactive regulation that if you don't think about it and don't plan for it, when your nervous system gets triggered, you're not going to remember to do it. I actually call this the SOS model, but it's the same couple of ideas of your regulation. You're regulating your breathing, you're regulating your rhythm, you're regulating your rest, and you're regulating your rituals. So it's like having an understanding that our job every day is to be proactive in regulating our nervous system, but it's also to have a plan to be able to regulate our nervous system reactively so that when things happen and when life happens and when business happens, we can reset and come back to presence or come back to an empowering perspective and be able to make a conscious and clear decision where our brain and our body can operate with a clear strategy because it's not in survival mode. And so I see this all the time with entrepreneurs who think they're like, I'm just lazy. I'm so distracted. I'm not getting the things done on my list, right? Like I have this whole thing to do and I know I need to do them, but I just don't get them done. I just don't X. I just don't Y. And they convince and gaslight themselves that they're lazy. But truthfully, it's most likely that you're under recovered and not even physical rest, nervous system rest, like the ability to rest and reset, the ability to step away, to take a moment, to not feel guilty about going for a 1 hour walk outside, to not feel guilty about going and getting a 1 hour massage, to not feel guilty about, I do this all the time, taking yourself to dinner and leaving your phone in the car and just eating presently with yourself, to not feel guilty about choosing to sit down on the couch on a Friday night and watch a documentary of your choice, to not feel guilty to have a 1 hour lunch meeting with a friend go over for 3.5 hours. I just did that like an hour ago. Love you, Dan and Adrian. Thank you for driving so far to have lunch with me. But to not feel guilty about those things, but to celebrate those things and realize that there are choices that we're making to regulate our nervous system, to help our body, and to make sure that we're in a peak state. And, when I think about this, I think about this podcast as a whole, over 600 episodes. I've told so many stories throughout the time of having this podcast about the mistakes that I've made while being dysregulated, including like how the SOS model was born, which is because my nervous system was dysregulated and I did not set myself up. I lost 2 clients and found out after the fact that I was operating on false information, and the thing that I was afraid of that dysregulated my nervous system never happened in the first place. So that was a six-figure mistake, including like at the beginning of COVID, 5-ish years ago, when everything that I had worked for, my mastermind, the companies basically all disappeared in like 2 weeks. And my body wanted to go into reactive mode over and over and over. But I knew from learning this and knowing this and teaching this that wasn't the best state. And so I worked for weeks to regulate my nervous system and hiked and hiked and hiked and hiked, and eventually came to the idea of launching this podcast. And this podcast was born out of executing what I'm talking about in today's episode. And so I can give you hundreds of examples of myself or of clients or of friends or mentors or mine, but you also can as well if you actually just pause and think about it. Either somebody that you know and love, when you looked at them and you're like, God, that life situation of theirs, I feel like they should be more upset than they are. I feel like they should be reacting differently. How are they not losing their mind right now? And then eventually you let a month follow, 2 months follow, and you look at them and they're living in a completely different outcome. And it's not because the situation changed. It's because they made sure that they controlled their nervous system in the situation to be able to make sound decisions. And I think all of us can think of somebody in that circumstance or perspective right now. And truthfully, it's been friends of mine like that I've watched and witnessed walk through hard times in business and, losing $5 million in a day or needing to come up with, $2 million in 24 hours to navigating, massive trauma in their family unexpectedly or death or all these other things. But it was their ability to stay in their body and regulate their nervous system that allowed them to make the most sound and clear decisions. And then in that process, those are the people that inspired me and led me and changed my perspective on certain things. And so when we think about these stories or these illustrations, I think what's important to recognize is that there is no finish line to regulating our nervous system. We live in a world that by design or by default or by accident, by default, dysregulates our nervous system. Everything is competing for our attention, right? I heard somebody say this the other day, that if you're not paying to use a product, you are the product. Right? We think about things like Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and all these platforms that we all love, but we're the product of those. And their product only wins if they keep us on it. They make money the more we use it. But those products are designed to get our dopamine elevated, right? To make us feel things, to stick around, to feel guilt if you end the scroll, to have the FOMO of like, I didn't make it to the end of the feed. Even there is no end of the feed, but it's designed to dysregulate your nervous system. And it's important to recognize this and the fact that I said that there's two ways. There's the proactive that we do every day, but then there's also the reactive that we have to have a plan to catch ourselves when we realize the world around us is dysregulating us, when it's pulling us into distraction, when it's pulling us into overwhelm, where it's giving us evidence to actually make our breakdown or dysregulation worse. And then the actions that we're taking are not aligned with the results that we want in our life. And it's important to understand as entrepreneurs how we apply this and why we apply this, but it's 100% the operating normal. It's not this thing that you get and you're like, oh, it's in my toolbox. It's this thing that you have an awareness of, and then you spend every day of the rest of your life practicing this. And if you're a parent listening to this, I'm a parent, right? We do this really well as parents. Like there's only so many times when you have a 3 or a 4-year-old that you can hear daddy, 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 or mommy, 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 mommy. And it's like your body starts reacting, and then you just learn to like breathe and be calm. And in that pressure and in that noise, be like, honey, I love you. Mommy needs a minute, right? And it's this muscle that we're practicing, that we're regulating our nervous system in what could be considered some of the most stressful times, like not sleeping with a toddler, stress, all these checklists to get done. And then we try to find peace and we try to find calm to make the next best decision, which as an entrepreneur are the things that we're doing every day. We're trying to walk into unknown situations, uncertain situations that the field changes daily. And that field is going to try to dysregulate our nervous system. But if it does, then we become a victim of those circumstances and we start reacting. And we typically don't like the reactions, but instead is that field of distractions or noise or nervous system dysregulation are the symptoms that are invitations for us to regulate our nervous system. And it's important that we spend the time proactively, right? Having a daily habit of a stillness practice, of our breathing practice, of having rituals and rhythms that fill our bucket and get us into our body somatically outside of our business, but that we also have a reactive plan so that when we are in our business and in our life and something happens or our nervous system gets dysregulated, that we have a process or a procedure or a path to follow to get back into regulation. And so when we think about this, I want you to think of a time in your life or in your business that you made a decision, an important decision, after resting instead of reacting. So think about one of those times where you were like got triggered or tilted or dysregulated. And you're like, God, I just want to send them a text right now, but you waited, right? And you're like, but I can't, I won't. And you waited 24 hours or you waited an hour and then you chose to send it later. What did you notice, right? What was the outcome? Was it more ideal than less ideal, right? Or those moments where you're like, God, I just want to close the business. I can't do this anymore. And you realize that if you followed through with that, you wouldn't be living in your current vision now. But after some resting or hitting a reset or clearing your head, it led you to realize that that wasn't really the thing you wanted to do, but your nervous system was screaming for rest. It was screaming for a reset. And that's what we're talking about. And so I want you to like think about moments that are present for you right now, right? These could be red flags or symptoms in your life or business. And trust me, I'm navigating my own because these never go away. With client relationships, with emails that you're behind on, with intrapersonal relationships, with co-parenting, they're everywhere, right? There's all these decisions. But I want you to think to or bring to mind 1 to 3 symptoms that you might be experiencing right now that almost feel like I have to react. But I want you to like take some time and I want you to ask yourself, like, what would it look like if you slowed down with each of those reactions and waited? Like just waited 15 minutes before you sent that response on social media, right? Or you get this great idea, but it's almost like out of reaction, out of fear to like launch a product and like go for a walk and allow yourself to workshop it and feel it, but don't make a decision until your nervous system is calm. Or you have a team member that really upsets you. And this one I see a ton in coaching and consulting people of like, they made a mistake and the knee-jerk reaction is I have to fire them. And then they end up losing one of their best teammates ever and regretting it. And I've seen people hire people back just because there was this miscommunication because the nervous system dysregulation prevented that person from having clarity. But I want you to ask yourself, like, what would some of these decisions look like if we just allowed ourselves to hit reset? If we just allowed ourselves to try our best to make a decision from a place of calm and presence. And I know for me in, navigating a divorce and, co-parenting my son as he has, 2 parents who love him to pieces. And my ex and I both care about each other deeply, but there's a lot of nuance that certain situations I've never navigated before. So it's like, how do I communicate more effectively? I'm like, okay, how do I find the truth in this situation? Or navigating business deals. I'm like, here's what I'm thinking and feeling, but is that the only truth? Is there another perspective? And I know for me, the biggest breakthroughs that I've seen in my life come from when I take a step back from the situation. I allow myself to feel, I pray to God deeply about it. And I look for peace and clarity. And then when my nervous system is calm, I'm like, okay, that's the thing I want to act on. But it requires that we start building a muscle and building a relationship with this, because I think, and this is just my thought from my experience of what I've noticed coaching some very, very successful people and truthfully having a lot of success on my own, that the number, like top 3, I don't want to say number 1, because I think perspective is one of them, but in the top 3 of most powerful skills that every single one of them has in common, where they're all massively successful, is that they always look calm and peaceful under the most heavy, almost feeling insurmountable weight of circumstances that I've ever seen. And it's not that they're pretending, it's that they take time to go process or to get clear or to regulate. And they operate in this like very clear, very calculated, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. I can't be on tilt in this decision. I can't allow my emotions to cloud my judgment. And it's this muscle that they flex over and over. And I think it's an invitation for all of us at every stage of business, at every stage of life, of like, where do I allow myself to accidentally make decisions when I'm dysregulated? And where are the opportunities for me to regulate, to be able to create the ideal situations or outcomes that I desire? And I think what the invitation for all of us is, at minimum, is to deepen our practice with our proactive regulation, whether that's just 3 minutes of daily breath work when you wake up, or 3 times for 1 minute throughout the day breathing, or a walking ritual to get outside in nature and off your phone, to allow ourselves to very proactively build this muscle of regulating our nervous system, and at minimum have a plan for what to do when it gets dysregulated. And if you need that plan, I actually have a model on this called the SOS. And you can just go to mindofgeorge.com/SOS. But what it's designed to do is it's designed for you when you find yourself dysregulated, or the word that people use is triggered. I use tickled. A plan and a path to follow to reset and regulate your nervous system to allow you clarity to get back onto the field. And I think it's an invitation for all of us. And so I believe, and I would submit with a lot of confidence, if I was a betting man, that our ability to regulate our state is probably one of our greatest business edges or advantages. Because I think from pure peace comes pure power. And I think that that's the invitation that we all have, is how can we be peaceful, centered, and grounded in our own experience, no matter what experience is happening around us, so that we have the clearest picture of the clearest next step to take. And so that's what I wanted to share today, because I genuinely believe that this is probably one of the most unpopular topics that I don't see podcasts on, that I don't see people talking about, that everyone throws away and dismisses as like foo-foo or fluff. That is probably the most important topic, because our nervous system dictates the state that we are in, and that state dictates the decisions that we make. And we are the human beings at the helm of the business. So the more regulated our state is, the more likely we are to succeed at the levels that we think we can succeed at, as long as we focus on this. But it's not fun of like, I'm going to make money rich, and it's not this one time fits all solution. No, I think it's the secret to life as well. I think for me, it's the secret to my faith. Of moments where I feel out of control, God is telling me I'm not in control, but it's an invitation to give it to Him. It's an invitation to give it to Him and rely on Him and to operate in obedience. But I can't allow my nervous system to allow me to sin, or to be resentful, or carry resentment in my heart, or harbor judgment. I get to wring those things out, and I can only do that through process. I breathe, I pray, I cry, I ask for forgiveness, then I ask for what my next step is. And then when I get that step, my nervous system is calm, I take that step and I move on to the next one. And so I really, really invite you to take a deep, deep look at your relationship with your nervous system. I know we all know sleep is important as entrepreneurs, and we try to get a lot of it, but like, how much rest and sleep and recovery are you giving your nervous system? How much are you caring for your emotional engine? Is it redlining? Is it burnt out? Because I promise you that's not going to lead to where you would like it to lead. Because any strategy that you try to implement without regulation just equals sabotage. And I think this is an invitation for all of us to slow down, to step back, and to regulate our nervous system. And so I wanted to share this with you. I love you. This might just be an episode for me to myself, because it's something that I work on every single day. And the longer I've been in this work, which is over 20 years now, 2 decades, the more I realize that this is the most important work that will stick around forever. But I wanted to share this with you. And this was the 4th part of that keynote that I gave in Vegas that went over really, really well. And on the next solo episode, on the next Monday show, we're going to have the final episode of that series of this 2.5-hour keynote I gave, which is going to be talking about and me taking you into what I consider the most important game that we all play, which is what I call the invisible game. And so if you want me to make this easy for you, if you're like, I understand, I need to reset my nervous system, I need to regulate my nervous system, I want that SOS tool, you can literally just DM me on Instagram, SOS, and I will send it to you. I will send you the page, I will send you the resource, I will send you the training, I will send you everything that goes with it on me. You just need to shoot me a DM that says SOS. And I just want to say thank you. I appreciate you. I love you. I hope you have the absolute best day. Remember that relationships will always beat algorithms. And I think the invitation today is to regulate your nervous system and start to build a relationship with it, so that you control that relationship and not the world around you. So I will either see you in the next episode, or you will hear me in your earballs. But either way, I'm out.